It all started with something so subtle, most people would have missed it. A quiet update on the official royal family website, the kind of thing you'd never notice unless you were watching closely. For years, that site carried long biographies of each working member of the family. Education, career highlights, even the kinds of patronages that made them look respectable in the eyes of the public. But on October 1st, 2025, things looked different. Harry and Meghan's pages weren't just trimmed, they were gutted. Gone were the elaborate details about her schooling, her supposed dual degree at Northwestern, that much-debated internship in Argentina. Gone, too, were the reminders of Harry's questionable academic record at Eton. What remained was a bland, almost sterile description of Meghan as a former actress best known for Suits, plus a mention of her lifestyle blog. For Harry, the edits were just as surgical. Only the safe, neutral facts survived. Now, on the surface, that might look like the palace was just doing a spring cleaning, but if you dig deeper, it tells a very different story. This wasn't about tidying up biographies. It was about damage control. The monarchy knows what the rest of us know. Meghan's carefully curated past is full of holes, and Harry's education came under a cloud of scandal years ago. By scrubbing those details, the palace is quietly admitting, we don't want to defend these claims anymore. They didn't correct them publicly. They didn't issue statements. They simply erased. And that raises the big question, why now? The answer may lie in how relentless Meghan has been in retelling her own story, reshaping the facts to suit her narrative. She's claimed, for instance, that she spent grad night at Disneyland in 1999, spinning it as a nostalgic rite of passage. The problem? Her high school has confirmed there wasn't even a grad night that year. Not enough students had signed up, so the trip never happened. If anyone went, it was on their own dime, not a school event. Yet Meghan has repeated the tale as if it's gospel, and Harry, ever the eager partner, has even backed her up in interviews. To the palace, watching these stories gain traction must have been maddening. Then there's the Argentina episode. Meghan has long painted that short stay in Buenos Aires as a glamorous official internship at the US Embassy. But people who were actually there tell a different tale. It wasn't a government-sanctioned placement. It was a favor from her uncle who pulled strings to let her shadow diplomats for a few weeks. Even more glaring, Argentina in 2002 was in chaos. Riots, economic collapse, streets under red alert. Embassy staff weren't allowed to stroll the city carefree, much less attend tango nights like Meghan has hinted. And yet she's spoken of it as though she spent a romantic semester sipping wine and learning Spanish. It simply doesn't hold up. The inconsistencies don't stop there. At Northwestern University, Meghan has repeatedly said she double majored in theater and international relations. The problem? Northwestern doesn't even offer an international relations major. The closest program is international studies, a subtle but telling difference. On top of that, records suggest she never even completed her final semester. She wasn't in the yearbook photo for the 2003 graduating class, and staff confirmed she wasn't physically present at the time. None of that lines up with her narrative of proudly holding a dual degree. And while Meghan's embellishments grab most of the headlines, Harry isn't immune. The whispers about his time at Eton have circulated for years. He supposedly struggled so badly that a teacher helped him by writing an art essay just to get him through. That teacher was later dismissed and took legal action against the school, claiming she'd been punished for revealing too much. If the allegations are true, Harry should never have qualified for Sandhurst, the elite military academy. Yet, he did, thanks to the quiet machinery of the monarchy, making sure the spare always had a respectable resume. When you put it all together, the palace's sudden edits look less like routine maintenance and more like strategic retreat. They're distancing themselves from questionable claims, quietly trying to avoid the embarrassment of having promoted stories that don't stand up to scrutiny. What's left are sanitized versions of Harry and Meghan, two people who once seemed to promise a fresh future for the monarchy, now reduced to footnotes, carefully stripped of controversy. The irony is that this cleanup only makes people more curious. If there was nothing to hide, why delete so much? Why erase details about Meghan's supposed international career path or Harry's education? Why leave Catherine and Sophie with full glowing bios while Harry and Meghan's are practically skeletons? It's because the palace knows every line left up is a line that can be fact-checked. And right now, fact-checking doesn't favor Meghan or Harry. Prince William's words about Windsor cut through all the noise. Standing in the place his grandmother loved most, he admitted openly that he missed her every day, describing Windsor as her. It wasn't rehearsed spin. It wasn't a polished PR statement. It was raw honesty from a man who clearly adored his grandparents. That moment said more about William's character than any official biography could. And the contrast couldn't be sharper when you look at how Harry and Meghan's stories unravel the moment anyone starts digging. William doesn't need to embellish or invent. His credibility is rooted in truth and tradition. For Meghan and Harry, the pattern of exaggeration and spin keeps catching up with them. Take Meghan's so-called dual degree. For years, it was presented as proof that she was more than just an actress, that she had the academic chops to match her Hollywood hustle. But when Northwestern itself won't back up the claim, what does that tell you? She majored in theater, yes, but the international relations angle seems to be a self-styled invention. And when alumni or staff quietly confirm she wasn't even on campus for the last semester, that's not a small oversight. That's a fundamental contradiction. Yet this version of her story was carried on the royal website for years, presented as fact until it quietly disappeared. Harry's education is just as muddy. His struggles at Eton were well documented among insiders, but the monarchy needed him to look polished. Sandhurst doesn't take underqualified candidates, yet somehow Harry got in. The teacher who allegedly wrote his essay then found herself unemployed, raising enough of a legal fuss to force compensation. That's not rumor, it's documented. And instead of addressing it, the institution simply closed ranks and carried on as though nothing had happened. Now, years later, with the spotlight harsher than ever, those messy truths are being quietly erased. The timing matters here. It's not random that these edits arrived in 2025 when Harry and Meghan continue to push themselves into the cultural conversation. Meghan has doubled down on her version of high school nostalgia, claiming grad night trips that never happened. She's leaned on Argentina stories that paint her as adventurous in a year when Argentina was literally a danger zone. These aren't just harmless embellishments, they create a false picture of who she was, and they fall apart with the slightest scrutiny. The palace, unwilling to play defense any longer, simply cuts the rope. That silence speaks volumes. For a family obsessed with image and legacy, to remove details rather than defend them is a strategic choice. It signals that those details can't be protected. By contrast, look at the bios of Catherine or Sophie. They remain thorough, detailed, and intact, because there's nothing explosive to hide. Catherine's education, her years at St. Andrews, her charitable work, even her hobbies, every line checks out. Sophie's path through PR to her role as Countess of Wessex, again, no contradictions, no fabrications. That's the standard, and it's clear who meets it and who doesn't. There's also the bigger narrative to consider. Meghan built much of her public image on being self-made, hardworking, and whip-smart. She used those anecdotes about internships, dual degrees, and adventurous travel as proof of her global sophistication. Without them, what's left is a straightforward story. A California girl who pursued acting, landed a role on Suits, and ran a lifestyle blog. There's nothing shameful about that. It's actually a respectable, grounded trajectory. But for Meghan, that apparently wasn't enough. She needed to gild it, to make it shinier, to dress it up as something grander. Harry, meanwhile, has always leaned on being the royal rebel with just enough credentials to keep him respectable. Military training, service in Afghanistan, the charm of being Diana's younger son, it gave him an edge. But the cracks have always been there. His academic struggles, his party boy years, the scandals that trailed him, they were once brushed aside. Now, when paired with Meghan's questionable narratives, they look less like isolated hiccups and more like a pattern of smoke and mirrors. The palace isn't naive. They know public memory is short, but they also know the internet isn't. Screenshots exist, videos exist, fact checkers are ruthless. By cutting down these bios, they're trying to minimize the ammunition. The fewer claims left standing, the fewer stories that can be dismantled. It's damage limitation, pure and simple. The irony is that this strategy also confirms what critics have been saying for years, that the fairy tale version of Harry and Meghan never matched reality. Their biographies were padded with half-truths, and the moment scrutiny got too sharp, the padding was stripped away. What remains is a portrait the monarchy's willing to stand behind. Flat, bland, safe. And in the image-driven world of royalty, safe is just another word for, we don't trust this story anymore. The removal of Harry and Meghan's details from the royal website doesn't just expose holes in their stories, it shines a light on how the monarchy itself manages perception. This is an institution built on image, tradition, and selective memory. They've always known when to spotlight a family member's achievements and when to quietly bury their controversies. What makes this moment different is how blatantly the deletions point to a loss of faith in two people who once carried enormous symbolic weight. Harry was Diana's son, the beloved spare who kept the monarchy human. Meghan was the glamorous outsider, a modernizing force who promised diversity and progress. Together, they could have redefined the firm. Instead, they've become liabilities, and the website reflects that reality. The shift becomes even clearer when you compare their treatment to others who've also stepped back. Princesses Eugenie and Beatrice, for instance, don't appear as working royals. And yet, there's no mystery about why. They've never pretended to be more than they are. They support causes, they attend family events, and they live relatively normal lives. There are no exaggerated claims about their education, no fanciful stories about international adventure. Their absence is clean and uncontroversial. Harry and Meghan's, by contrast, feels like a scorched earth cleanup. What makes this particularly damaging for Meghan is how the revelations undercut the narrative she's tried to control for years. When she claimed her high school celebrated grad night at Disneyland, the actual school contradicted her. When she talked about her embassy internship, insiders painted a very different picture. When she invoked an international relations degree, Northwestern's own structure disproved it. None of these on their own might have sunk her credibility, but together they form a pattern. They suggest that Meghan's image has been crafted less by truth and more by ambition. For Harry, the palace's move revives questions about his academic history. If he needed help to scrape through Eton, if a teacher's essay carried him forward, if Sandhurst bent the rules to accommodate him, then the myth of Harry the capable soldier prince weakens. He did serve. He did wear the uniform. And those things earned him respect. But the foundation beneath that respect looks shakier when the palace quietly wipes away the context. It hints that they know those details could explode again in the public eye, and they'd rather not fight that battle. The wider press has often shied away from these contradictions, either out of fear of being labeled unfair, or because the Sussex narrative sold well. But the cracks can't be ignored forever. Independent investigators, alumni, and even former staffers have started speaking up, filling in the gaps with information the couple probably hoped would stay buried. Every time a new detail emerges, Meghan and Harry's critics don't have to stretch far. They just point to the palace's own edits as proof that the monarchy itself doesn't buy into the Sussex version of events anymore. The most fascinating part is how all of this plays into public trust. For years, Meghan and Harry claimed they left the royal family because of unfair treatment, racism, and a lack of support. There's truth in some of those claims. The palace is notorious for protecting the crown over individuals. But when their own personal stories collapse under scrutiny, it makes their larger crusade harder to champion. If someone is willing to exaggerate a resume, how much faith can the public put in their larger accusations? That question lingers, and it's not going away. Meanwhile, the palace is betting on patience. They don't need to issue statements or wage press wars. They just need to let time do the work. By removing the biographies, they're signaling to future readers, researchers, and journalists, only the sanitized version counts. What isn't written down won't be remembered. It's a strategy they've used before with other scandals, and often it works. The difference here is the scale of the digital age. Screenshots circulate, YouTube channels dissect timelines, and every inconsistency is archived somewhere. The monarchy can edit their site, but they can't edit the internet. What remains is a stark portrait of two lives reshaped by scrutiny. Meghan wanted to be seen as worldly, intellectual, and exceptional, but the evidence shows an actress with modest beginnings who made it big through persistence and connections. Harry wanted to be the soldier prince, but questions about how he got there reveal a man carried by privilege as much as effort. None of this makes them villains, it makes them human. But the problem is, they've tried to sell a myth instead of embracing the truth, and once a myth unravels, it rarely recovers. In the end, the royal website edits are more than housekeeping, they're a warning. The monarchy is pulling back the safety net, leaving Harry and Meghan to stand on their own stories. Without the institution to prop them up, the gap between the myth and the truth has never been more exposed.